Welcome to WebStudio Basics Rating Projects. This module reviews the basic information required to understand WebStudio when used for rating. Note that OpenL tablets can be used in many different contexts, not just rating for rating policies and quotes in an insurance domain, but it can also be used by ClaimCore for fraud rules, which detects fraudulent claims. OpenL Tablets is an open source application that has been adopted by lots of different companies and can be used in lots of different scenarios. Let's get started. OpenL Tablets is a business rule management system, which is a software system used to define, deploy, execute, monitor, and maintain a variety of complex decision logic that is used by operational systems within inside of an organization or enterprise. This logic, also referred to as business rules, includes calculations, algorithms, requirements, data, factors, and conditional statements that are used to determine actions or values that are returned to another application or within inside of the rules project itself. OpenL tablets consist of the components on this screen, which is a solution for a business rule management system. First, here we have the rules engine, which executes rules and is a runtime environment allowing applications to invoke decision logic managed by OpenL tablets. As we use rating logic as our example, you might notice we call the rules engine the rating engine. Then we have a rules repository, which allows decision logic to be externalized from the core application code and also allows for collaborative working on rules, versioning of rules, and puts security around rules development. Then we also have a requirement for a business rule management system to provide a tool to develop rules and logic in. OpenL Tablets actually has two tools, one that allows technical developers and another which empowers business experts to define and manage decision logic. The OpenL plugin for developers provides Java developers with rich functionality to develop rules projects, while WebStudio component is a web-based application for business users to create and make changes to rules, factors, and data using either WebStudio or Microsoft Excel. Additionally, users can run tests to ensure the rules results are as expected. And also, they can deploy a finalized rule project from their development environment into a QA or UAT testing environment. In our course, we're going to be using WebStudio for rating, and we'll be making changes to rating projects, which are actually rating plans, and then we'll run rate tests. While our training courses focus on rating insurance quotes and policies, it's good to note that OpenL can be used for more than just creating rating plans, but for any scenario where you can separate the logic from the code. Another example is that ClaimCore uses OpenL for fraud detection rules. But also OpenL has been used by outside companies for various purposes. In summary, OpenL Tablets is a solution for a business rule management system so developers and business users can create rules projects. We will focus on the WebStudio component, which allows business users to create and update rules and not involve developers to code their algorithms or make their updates for them. Here is a very simplified view of production for a business user that shows that the business rules engine and the rules repository are the only pieces of the OpenL tablet solution that are actually deployed in a production view. The rules development components are only really needed in a development environment to develop the rules with. In this illustration, there's a web service server and a web service client. You see that the rules engine has a web service layer that an application can make a call to. In the example you see right here, we have an EIS product that was developed, and it makes a web service call to OpenL to request a value like a premium. In the web service call, the EIS product will send a message to the OpenL's rules engine that will contain all the data that the rules engine requires to calculate the value that the application is asking for, in this situation premium. So it's sending over all of the rating data that's needed, such as the coverage or maybe location or vehicle for the policy that's being quoted. So, and then the OpenL rules engine is going to check to make sure that all the data is there that's required, because if it's not, it's going to return an error. But if it is all there, it's going to perform all of the calculations and run the conditions and so forth and return the value that was requested. So this is an extremely basic explanation, and it's good to note that there's a lot of development and integration work that needs to be done for this exigent product to actually talk to the rules engine via a web service. But this is really just a basic overview, so you understand that you have the application, which is separate and has its data model and data attributes, and then you have the rules engine, which has the data model to run the rating rules, and then there's a mapping of those two in between so they know what data's what, but they're two separate applications, and one is calling the business rule engine for a value, and it's then getting that value returned from the OpenL Tablet Rules Engine. So before you can start creating rules in WebStudio, you must have a basic understanding of what a project is. Initially, you'll have a rating plan, which is going to be turned into a project in WebStudio. All the logic, data, conditions, and calculations of a company's rating plan will be written in OpenL Tablets using rule syntax and is stored in a project. A project is a logical storage container for all rules that pertain to, let's say, one product, a home product, or maybe a auto product. You may want to make different projects. You'll definitely want to make different projects for your different products. You may also make different projects for testing complex projects, but we'll talk about that later. As we continue to talk about WebStudio and creating rules, we're going to talk about modules and workbooks. So a rating project contains all the workbooks associated with a specific product. This is how OpenL Tablets stores a rating plan for a product. The term module and workbook may be used interchangeably by analysts and developers. An analyst understands the term and use of workbooks. Excel workbooks are used to store rating plans versioned by effective date and request date for a specific product, hence rating project. OpenL Tablets supports the XLS and the XLSX Excel file formats. In WebStudio, you'll select on modules which are representations of a workbook in WebStudio. In the example, there is a project called Tutorial Auto Policy Calculation. And underneath of that, you see two modules, one called Auto Policy Calculation and the other called Auto Policy Tests. Now behind that graphic, you are seeing a workbook which is associated with one of those modules. That's the representation of the module in workbook form. Note that each module has its own workbook. A project may have many modules which represent different versions of a rating plan for various effective dates, as well as a workbook that lists the data model used for a rating plan and other required Java classes. And in this example, there's actually a separate module too of test data. At a very high level, we're going to discuss the changes that an analyst will use in WebStudio to make rating updates. So, for a business user, they can use WebStudio to make updates to rating tables and rules. So after they make those updates, they can then perform tests to see if all the changes that they made to the rules or data resolve in expected results. After that is complete and everything is correct, they're going to actually move or deploy their new updated rule from their development environment to a UAT environment. It is required that an administrator actually migrates any changes from a UAT environment into production. Now we are going to explore the workflow for making changes to a rules project or rating plan and the different work streams that are involved. As we've discussed before, we have a rating analyst, our business user who's going to be using WebStudio. Then we have an admin who is somebody from the IT team responsible for WebStudio administration, or maybe a power user who has rights to deploy rules. And then lastly, we have individuals from a development team. So first, let's start with the rating analyst. What they're going to do is they're going to access WebStudio via an environment they have been given and open up a rating project. So they're either going to create a new version of a rating module, or they're going to update an existing one. So after they figure out which method they're going to use, they're then going to edit that rule in either WebStudio or Microsoft Excel. Then they are going to update any testing data that they have, because they need to have a set of testing data to make sure that the changes that they've made to the rules are as expected. They'll run those tests for the rule, and once the tests have passed, they can save the project. Then they're going to notify their administrator. They would know who their administrator is by working on the project team. Then that admin will see if the changes impact integration, as there might be some more work that needs to be done if there was impacts to the integration, which that work varies from project to project. So then they're going to redeploy the project in the QA UAT environment. They're going to run their test scripts, and if it passes, then they can move on to promoting that same environment to a production environment. If it fails, they need to notify the rating analyst, because maybe there's some change that needs to happen. So moving down to the last work stream, if there was integration that needed to happen, that actually requires a change request to be implemented. So you're going to have another stream of work, and then you would have to again work with the admin and the rating analyst to make sure that everything tests and passes and the expected results are actually being resolved. Each implementation and project of OpenL, it can be slightly different, but as a general norm, for a business user who wants to access a rating project via WebStudio, the support team would send them an email with a URL and a username and password where they can actually access the development environment. So they can update a project, add rules, add test data, execute test data as well. And then when they're done, they can save the project, even maybe mark it that it's done in the development environment and ready to be deployed into QA and UAT environment. So then the admin will do the deployments for the QA and production environments. Also, a analyst will be given the exact name of the projects in the environment and the products that they're integrating with, so they know exactly what projects they should be updating. We're going to be taking a look at the navigation in WebStudio because it's going to be extremely important for you to understand how to navigate this application. So first we're looking at the repository view in WebStudio. There's actually two main views in WebStudio, the repository view and the rules editor view. You have to start in the repository view, as this is where you'll find all the rating projects, which are representations of your rating plans. Again, this is the rules repository. You need to check out a rule or your rating plan or your rating project in order, to start working. They're all kept in this repository as they maintained securely, and they're able for multiple users to update and then version properly. Each project in this repository must be checked out or opened in the editing status in order to update. The various projects are in the left-hand menu. You may select the folder associated with the project you're interested in, which then gives you the ability to select the Edit button to enable the ability to make updates to the project in the Rules Editor view. There are also the Open and Close buttons, so you can view as read-only or close a project that is in either Edit or Open status. The Rules Editor view is where you can actually view the various tables associated with the project. You may view them directly in this WebStudio application, or you could export them into Microsoft Excel. We'll get to that, but first you need to know that in order to even work on any project, you need to use the repository view and check out the project by putting it in editing status. So now we're going to take a look at the project left navigation in repository view. In the left menu of the repository view is the listing of projects. Each project contains multiple files. It is a combination of files that an analyst and a developer would work on for a rating project. It is critical that you understand the files inside the project, which should be updated by the analyst. As a standard, the files in the rules folder are the ones that an analyst should update. These files you'll see are the Excel files. Each Excel file is listed in a rules folder and is called a module, as we've discussed previously. Well, Workbooks are viewable in the repository view, and you can select on a module to export. You may also perform this exporting in the Rules Editor view. Note that a rating project is a Java project, and a Java developer would be familiar with the meta-inf, Maven, Common, and org folders, as well as the files such as properties, manifest, or any other files in there. As an analyst, you should only worry about the XLS files that are associated with rules and leave all the other files alone, as the developers are the ones who use these. So now if I selected the Rules Editor text at the top of the WebStudio application, I would be brought into the Rules Editor view, where you can view projects that are in the open or edit status. You can view the contents of one module at a time. Using the left menu, you can select either the project name, which will bring you a view of all the contents of the project, or you can actually select on a module's name to view the contents of that module, which are a workbook, via the WebStudio application. Also, when first entering into the Rules Editor view, you will see listed in the design area all the documentation for OpenL Tablets, which is the most up-to-date documentation, and you'll really want to make sure that you review that information because it's a great resource for syntax while you're using WebStudio. The term module used in the WebStudio documentation is so important to understand. what it means really in the context of WebStudio. A module is this logical term that we use for how rules are stored, and they're really actually physically stored in Excel. The term module and workbook, as I've said before, may be used interchangeably by analysts and developers, but each workbook in a project is a separate module. Excel workbooks are used to store rating plans. In WebStudio, in the Rules Editor view, you can think of a module as any file that is in black under the blue project name. There are different types of modules that may be created specific for the implementation. You'll see in this course that there are modules created specifically for data types, which is the domain model or the data model for a rating project. So in one workbook, you'll have the data model that you'll use to develop calculations and algorithms. And that's also mapped to the application as well. Then you also have rating modules where you store all of your rules and algorithms and tests and conditional statements for your rating project. Other implementations might also have modules that are all your testing data. So you store all your test data in its own module. And again, this is very implementation specific, because you could actually put your test data inside of your rating module, and you could put your data model inside of your rating module, but usually separating these out into different modules gives you a real clear picture of your different areas that are required and ensures that you don't accidentally mess up any of your rating plans by accident. So we've gone over the views in WebStudio, some basic, terminology and things that you'll use when in WebStudio. But now we're going to talk about viewing modules in the Rules Editor, but then you can also edit them in Excel. So while you can view the contents of a workbook inside of WebStudio, you can also export the entire workbook as one XLS file and then use Excel to make your updates. In the Rules Editor view, you must select on a table in a project to do this. Once you've selected on a table, buttons will appear in the design window. You'll select the Open button, and then the entire workbook will download to your system. You could have used the Export the Module button via the repository view by locating the XLS file, the rules folder, as we've shown before, and using the Export button. So you can actually, edit a module or open a module or export a module either in the Rules Editor view or the repository view. You can make updates and changes directly in Microsoft Excel. But it's important to understand how the various worksheets are being used, as well as any dependencies, the syntax which defines the tables and rules, and other reserved keywords for algorithmic processing. We'll describe a lot of that and review it in different modules. And lastly, before we get into the demonstration of what we just discussed in this module, I've talked about you being able to edit your workbooks in Excel, but you can absolutely use WebStudio. Any changes you make via the WebStudio interface will then programmatically update your Microsoft Excel workbook. So you also have that option, which I'll show you in a bit. So let's get on to our demonstration in WebStudio. Now we're going to do a demonstration of WebStudio. Here is the link that I was given to access the WebStudio environment online. I was given a username and password as well that I will enter in to authenticate. I will select the Sign In button, and I am brought into the OpenL Tablets WebStudio application. Let's go over this interface first. You can see up top We're currently in the Rules Editor view. Later, I'll switch to the Repository view to open up a project. You should note right here you have the OpenL Tablets documentation. As you start to develop using WebStudio, you will want to reference this documentation as it has a lot of instructions and syntax that's going to be required for you to create rule projects. So you can notice over here underneath of projects right now in the Rules Editor view, we have no projects in this workspace. The first step that you're actually going to need to do is go to the Repository view, either through this link or through the top link up here, to open up or put a project in the editing status. So here we are in the Repository view. You can see all of the projects that we have in this specific environment. Different implementations will have different projects. So you can go over to the left-hand menu and also expand the project folder. And you'll see a listing of projects is here as well. Notice for the project, we have the project name, the revision that we're at, the status. This is very important. All these projects are closed right now. We need to put a project in the edit status in order to actually edit the rules. Who it was modified by, when it was modified at, and some actions that we can perform. For training purposes, I'm going to use the project Example 3 Auto Policy Calculation. I'm going to expand this project and we're going to look inside of it. In this example, we have some Excel files and a Word document associated with this project. These Excel files are also called modules. But before we get into that, in order to edit anything inside of this project, and each project will look different for each implementation depending on how the project team structures this. You could see inside of this project file a folder that says rules, and then all of the rules that you would update in WebStudio are stored in there. You might see some Java files in there that a business user shouldn't touch. It's different from implementation to implementation, but mainly a WebStudio user should be only really interested in the Excel files to change. Now, in order to get to edit these files, we need to select on the project name. And you'll notice when we select on the project name, we then have over here a bunch of buttons that just populated for us. We could open this project so we could view the rules, but really what we want to do is edit them and make this status right here edit. So I'm going to select edit. Now you can see the status is in editing. I'm going to go over to the Rules Editor view so you can see now that this project is open for editing. Now underneath of projects, we have Example 3 Auto Policy Calculation. And here we have the modules, the Excel files that can be updated. I'm going to select on one. Let's select on the Auto Policy Calculation. And then this is going to open up and I can expand the Auto Policy Calculation XLS file, and it's going to show me all of the contents that are associated with this Excel file. Well, we're going to go in and review how you make updates in WebStudio using this menu in the Rules Editor. But first I want to show you how to export this Excel file so you could actually open it up in Microsoft Excel and make your updates there. So I'm going to go back to the repository. In the repository, I'm going to locate the example. I'm going to select on Auto Policy Calculation, and then notice that we have three buttons that just populated for us: Update File, Export File, and Delete. You can manage your Excel files this way. I'm going to select Export. it's going to ask me what revision of this file do I want to export. There's only one version, so we're going to just keep the default and select the export button. You might select if the highest number here, if there was multiple versions of a file and you wanted the latest revision. So you'll notice that now my file has downloaded, and I'm going to actually open it up. I opened up the file that downloaded to my system, and it opened up in Microsoft Excel, the auto policy calculation Excel file. You'll notice that this is a workbook with many tabs in it. So we could make an update to this and then import this file back into our project via WebStudio. What I'm going to do for training purposes is I'm going to actually change the name of this workbook so you can see how this is performed. So I'm doing a file save as, and I'm going to just change the name. So I'll write example in as the file name. I'll select the save button. Now that's saved on my system. I can go and I can make some updates and so forth, save them. But right now it's just in Excel. It's not in WebStudio. So I'll close this out, and I'll want to actually import this file into our project. And in order to do that, I have to select on the project name, and then I'm going to use this button that's called Upload File. I'm then going to select the file by using the Add button, and here it right is. It's called Example. We named that Excel Workbook. Now you see that it's right here named. I'm going to actually have to select this Upload button, and you'll watch it upload. Now it's done. Now be careful here, because you also have to select this Upload button at the bottom of this window to upload the file. Now you will notice in my project I have a new module or a new workbook, which is a new version of your role project or your rating plan or whatever your example is, right here that we just uploaded. I could delete this file if I wanted to as well, but we're not going to right now. I'm going to go over to the Rules Editor view so we can make some updates, so you can see how WebStudio and Microsoft Excel interact with each other. So I selected Rules Editor, and now we have this example over here in our project. This is our module, our workbook that we just created. I'm going to select on it, and it's going to open up. I'm going to then expand, and you'll see that each one of my worksheets in my workbook has a different folder inside of my project, which I'm going to expand. Now, we're going to explore a table in my project called Vehicle Calculation. I'm going to select on that table, and here we have the table, how it is in our workbook, but viewable through WebStudio. I could make a change in WebStudio through this view of editing a module. Let's say for premium down here, let me just collapse that so you can see this. Let's just say I want to change this 1 to a 3. I'm going to select Edit. Now I can edit the table. I'm going to double click. I'm going to delete here, and I'm going to put a 3 in. Then you are going to need, when you're done, to hit the save button. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to save that in an Excel file that is the workbook. I'm going to hit save. Now you'll see that my 3 was saved. So if I open up the workbook, which you can do, I know we opened up the workbook via the repository view, but you can also open up your workbook through the Rules Editor by selecting on any table here and selecting the Open button. I'm going to select the Open button, and it's going to open up another version of the new workbook that's been saved. And if I go and show you on my calculation tab, see my calculation tab over here? Like I said, these tabs or worksheets are associated with the folders here in WebStudio, but you'll see my premium algorithm down here now has a 3. If I actually close this out, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to close it out. I'm going to turn this into a 4. And then I'm going to hit the Save button. Because you can make updates in WebStudio, or you can make the updates in Microsoft Excel. But just because I saved that Excel change to my system doesn't mean it's in WebStudio. I'm going to close this down. Right? Now I made the change of the 4. Remember that in a file that downloaded to my system, which is called example, and it's another version of example. Now even if I refreshed WebStudio by using this refresh button, you'll see that the 3 was not changed to the 4, even though I saved that change, because that's a change that was saved in an Excel file on my system. I would actually need to upload that into WebStudio for that to actually happen. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to the repository view. I'm going to go back into my project. I'm going to go back into example 3. And again, we were using this example module or workbook. I'm going to select on it. And there's the Update File button. I'm going to select Update File. I'm going to hit Add. I'm going to use the example 1 that I had. I'm going to upload. I'm going to update. And now we're done. It says the file was successfully updated. I'm going to go back to the Rules Editor view. I'm going to go back into the example. I have to expand right back to where I was in the calculation folder, then to vehicle calculation, and it's going to show me that table that I just updated with a 4. And you can notice now the 4 actually is displaying. The update was created by importing the new version of the Excel file. Also, you should notice that there are 2 buttons next to the refresh button, one for updating a module and another for exporting a module. So you can perform these 2 functions from this Rules Editor view. So that kind of goes over how you make changes in WebStudio and how you actually have to update your Excel file and then upload through WebStudio to have those changes to a module be reflected in your project. Now we're going to view a demonstration of actually running tests against the rules that you have developed. So now we're going to demonstrate testing a rule using test tables and test data. Now we've created our rules in a module called example, but our tests and our test data live in a separate module called example tests. I'm going to select on example tests, and you can see that I actually have some test tables down here, which we'll get into. You can go and use this button up here. You can use this test table button, and it will perform all the tests on the test tables inside of this module. You can use test per page. The drop-down box will limit how many test results you see per page. You could also select failures only. If you're only looking to see results that were not expected, you could select on this button, and then you can drill down to any issues that you have and correct them. And then you can select the test button and it will run tests for the whole module. Now you can see we have tests for driver calculation test, and you can see the result is a green check mark, which means it received the expected results. You can go and you can look at the table and you can see what the test data was, and if you see a green check mark, then you know the result was expected. If you saw a red X, you would know that there was a problem, and you could drill down further into this table to see where the issues occurred. Now notice, if I scroll, there's the policy calculation test, and you can see all the data and the results that happen when you ran the data for this test case. And going all the way down, we have another vehicle calculation test. If I use the left-hand menu, you can see under the test folder, we've expanded, and down in auto, we have this vehicle calculation test, which I spoke of. I'm going to select on there, and it's going to bring up the test table. You can see the test table here. Now, if I just wanted to check one test bed, I could just select on the test table and I could hit the run button. And that's going to give me the results of just one test table. So all of our results are good. I can go back to the repository. I can locate my project. I can select example 3. What I'm going to do right now, since everything has passed, we've made our change, and the tests have resulted in our expected results, we need to actually save the project, because right now the status is in editing. If I hit the save button, it's going to ask me if I want to then move this project to the next revision, and I do, and I can leave a comment. And then I'll hit save. Now, our project has a new revision number. It's in the open status, but it's not in the editing status anymore, so I could review it. But actually what we can do to end this is close the project using the close button. That concludes our demonstration. Please see other modules for more information about WebStudio.